Pamela, hello.
Hello, Gavin. How are you?
Good. Now, when I first read this verdict of Daoud Wright guilty on planning to behead you, I thought, was that wasn't the Texas guys? They're dead. And I realized, no, this is yet another example of someone trying to kill you.
This was a plot to behead me, led by this Daoud Wright. And yesterday, I'm very happy to report, I'm deeply grateful to the courageous jury for finding him guilty on all counts. He faces life in prison. And I say I'm very happy. It seems elemental that if you're planning to kill an American, not just kill, but behead. And if you've ever watched a beheading video, you know how gruesome and barbaric that is. But because we're living in such a state where I was blamed, after Garland, where they two jihadists opened fire on a free speech event, our free speech event in Texas. And, in Boston, my ads have been banned. And, after the bombing of the Boston Marathon, Boston Strong, teddy bears and candles. I mean, honestly, you cannot assume anything. So while for me it's not surprising, in the big scheme, this jury was very courageous, and I'm deeply grateful. I'm deeply grateful to them.
Well, look at the canary in the coal mine called Britain. We see guys get away with raping children regularly, and they have excuses like, I didn't understand the word no. We have a woman raped several times in one night. All these guys seem to, no, they don't all get away, but they seem to get away way too often. And then you have people being jailed for rude tweets and comments when they're white. So people here in America say, oh, Muslims are what, 1 or 2% of the population? There's never going to be Sharia law here. And I say, have a look at Britain, have a look at Europe. That's where we're headed.
Well, actually, and I'm banned. I'm banned from the UK. I've never advocated for violence, ever. I stand for freedom of speech because I believe in the war of ideas. My ideas will win. My ideas are better, which is why the left has to shut me down, because they cannot stand up to scrutiny and challenge. But I'm banned in the UK. But these hate preachers, these inciters to jihad, Jew hatred, and the slaughter of the infidel are welcomed. And this is why I wrote my book, FATWA, Hunted in America. First of all, there is a number of fatwas on me. A fatwa, for your listeners who may not know, is a legal ruling under a recognized authority in Islam. And it's a death sentence, and it has no expiration date, which is why, for example, the Charlie Hebdo staff of Paris Weekly in France was slaughtered almost 2 years after the first initial fatwa. When the Islamic State issued the fatwa, then I required 24-hour security. And this idea that an American in 21st century America needs 24 hours security to stand, because they stand in defense of freedom of speech, and the media blames them, is really striking. Some people think I'm a provocateur, which I'm not. And I threw a dart at a map of America and went to Garland. That's not what happened, Gavin. 3 days after the Charlie Hebdo bloodbath, Muslim leaders in this country got together in Garland, Texas, and held a conference, not in support of the First Amendment. That would have been a gorgeous moment for American Muslims. No, it was a conference in support of the ideology behind that bloodbath, behind that jihad slaughter. A Stand with the Prophet conference in support of the Sharia.
Wow.
So
I had no idea.
Yes, Stand with the Prophet. Google it, ladies and gentlemen. You'll see protesters outside. That's me.
That's incredible. And when that happened, I thought, what an exciting story. Someone does an art show for free speech. And by the way, no one ever talks about this. It was a good art show. The art there was very good. It wasn't a bunch of children drawing Muhammad with crayons. It was beautiful. The guy who won did a beautiful job. The picture's in your book.
Yes. It's interesting. I held an art exhibit. So it was not just the competition, but it was an exhibit of Muhammad depicted in art and literature over the past 1,400 years. And people were not always being killed. But clearly today it is, and that was the point. Clearly today it is a violent intimidation to impose these blasphemy laws, these Sharia laws in the West. The media never talks about the fact that there were depictions over the past 1,000 years, and the competition, which by the way was won by a former Muslim, Bash Forston.
Yes.
And what's interesting is that the FBI, as you know, we know now, was in on the planning. We know that from the text in a separate indictment for an ISIS recruiter, Eric Jamal Hendricks. They were in on the planning. They were at our event. They were in the car. 60 Minutes did a piece on this where they were in the car behind the jihadis. They got out and took cell phone footage right before the jihadis started firing. They got back into the car and drove away and were actually pulled over by the Garland police because the Garland police thought that the FBI were part of the jihad attack. They did not have anyone to defend us. They had no security there. They did not warn us. The security guard that was shot at Garland is suing the FBI for aiding and abetting the Islamic State. It was my security team that took out those two jihadis. It was my SWAT team that took out those two jihadis. And even in Boston, we found out in that beheading plot yesterday where the Dawood Wright, the jihadi, was found guilty. We find out the FBI was in on that plan too. They never warned us. So there's a real disconnect. There's a real problem in America. And we're seeing the same thing like those rape gangs in the UK where law enforcement knew about it and didn't do anything because they didn't want to be racist. Islam is not a race. It's an ideology. They didn't want to be racist and they didn't want to be Islamophobic. And we're seeing the same thing with the FBI now. You're seeing it with Vegas. Look, I don't know what happened in Vegas, but I can tell you this, Gavin. The most logical explanation, the top of the line, is jihad. Now, the fact that the FBI dismissed it out of hand, ISIS took credit for it, which they never do. They never take credit for events that are not theirs. When the jetliner went down in the Sinai, the Russian jetliner, and they took credit for it, and the authorities said no, it wasn't ISIS, and then they provided proof weeks later, photographic proof of the weaponry, and so the authorities had to backpedal with their tail between their legs. The Philippines this past June, Resorts World Casino, huge attack. ISIS took credit. They said, no, it wasn't them. It was a robbery. Nothing was robbed. Turns out it was sanctioned, if not directed, by the Islamic State. The idea that this guy had 200 financial transactions flagged for covert terrorism financing. The idea that Stephen Paddock made multiple trips to the Middle East. Where was he going? Who did he meet with? Are they investigating this? No. What I find disturbing is they're defaulting to this really absurd, nutty conspiracy theory that it was Valium. The guy had a prescription for Valium, 50 pills. He took 20 over 1,500 days or 18 months. And that's your obvious motive? The American people are woefully, painfully disarmed in the information battle space. This is a war, in the war of ideas, which is why they should be required to read my book, because I am but a proxy in this long and terrible war. And what happened to me is what happens to every American in small and large ways who stands in defense of freedom. If you told me on September the 12th, 2001, that those that stood in defense of America, individual rights and freedom, would be smeared, defamed, libeled, mocked, made into a monster, I would have had you Baker acted. I would have had you institutionalized, but that's exactly what happened. And the American people, no one is going to save you. You are going to save you, and you have to get armed. And the way to do that is to first learn everything. And my book, FATWA, Hunted in America, is the best place to start.
You just blew my mind. My mind looks like World Trade on September 12th, 2001. I have nothing but ash behind my eyes right now. There's so much there. Even in that one rant. The FBI knew about the attack and did nothing. If you didn't hire security, you would have died that day, as well as everyone there, and the FBI would have been complicit in that mass murder.
And let me tell you, it gets even worse, because the FBI was texting. The undercover agent was texting with the jihadis, Ibrahim Simpson and Nadia Soufi. Now, the question is, how do I know this? Because it came out, those texts, those actual texts, were part of an indictment against Eric Jamal Hendricks in North Carolina, who was indicted for recruiting for ISIS. He was a ringleader of Garland, and he wasn't arrested for 16 months. Why was he at large for 16 months? So when the left heard this story, the Daily Beast ran stuff like, well, look at this, the FBI was saying tear up Texas. They were trying to say that the FBI entrapped this group.
Oh, my God.
I didn't have a problem with that. I didn't even have a problem with tear up Texas, because I understand you have to embed, like Donnie Brasco and the Mafia. You have to embed these jihad cells. My problem was they never told us, they never warned us, and they had no one there. If I didn't have security there, they would have opened fire on hundreds of Americans. The first Islamic State attack in this country at a free speech event, at a freedom of speech event. And of course, no one ever talks about that it was the first Islamic State attack. No one ever talks about the attack because the media hates the narrative. They didn't even report on this beheading plot. The reason why they reported on it yesterday is because the guy was guilty on all 8 counts. It was amazing. They've ignored this story, but let me tell you something, Gavin. If a hijab-wearing Muslima was targeted by a Christian group, okay, in the cause of Jesus Christ, and they were found guilty on 8 counts, oh my God, there would be a statue replacing Christopher Columbus built to that woman in Central Park. That's the low state of freedom. And when you say Sharia is coming, I say to you, Sharia is here. Do you know in every city in this country, when I submitted ads, not to be provocative, to counter Muslim ads that were running that were viciously anti-Jewish or pro-jihad.
Yep.
So I would run an ad to counter it. I had to sue to get them up. I won in every city. And you know what happened? They imposed the Geller ban. They banned all political ads. Imagine, 21st century America, First Amendment. They banned all political and issue-related ads. In New York, Geller ban. Washington, Geller ban. Boston, Geller ban. Miami, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Denver. People, you think the American people know this? I submit to you, they do not know this, and that's why they need to read the book.
Yes, well, we will. I mean, I remember that going on in New York. And you know what this is a great example of? How bad the media is at doing their job. Like, when after that happened in Texas, the headline was, it should have been, lunatic jihadists drive across the country to kill American, get taken out by guns instantly, by armed men. Boom. That's a great, heroic First Amendment story. And then you go to the paper and it says, shooting at Muhammad cartoon contest in Texas leaves 2 people dead. Well, yeah, I guess technically it did leave 2 people dead, but it was 2 people that were trying to kill everyone.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, the mosque in Phoenix, their mosque, I mean, lied repeatedly. You know, behind every jihad attack is the imprimatur of a mosque, is the imprimatur of a Muslim cleric. They lied. They said they didn't really attend. Excuse me, Ibrahim Simpson was the star of their fundraising video. Ibrahim Simpson had been arrested for jihad terror-related crimes prior, and the mosque posted his bail. He slept in that mosque. His friend said everything he knew about Islam was from that mosque. Was that mosque ever investigated? No. As a matter of fact, I'd like to know why Stephen Paddock kept going to Phoenix and buying his weapons there and driving back. Is there a connection to that mosque? I don't know. But I'll tell you something. If after Garland that mosque was monitored, you would know. You would absolutely know. You have to investigate these mosques like the Islamic Society of Boston that is behind the Boston Marathon bombing, Tariq Mahana, multiple jihad attacks. These are not happening in a vacuum. And when the FBI talks about terrorist propaganda, I mean that's just a dysphemism for the Quran, because that's where all of this, they're citing Quran chapter and verse. The Islamic State is citing Quran chapter and verse, and people think that once the Islamic State is defeated, that's it. Excuse me, there are thousands of Muslim armies: Boko Haram, El Shabaab, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic State, Mujahideen. I mean, you and I, we don't have the time for me to start listing them. But the fact is, the problem is in the jihadic doctrine. This is the problem. And the fact that we can't talk about it, and anyone that does will be smeared, defamed, and libeled. In Muslim countries, you're assassinated if you violate the Sharia. In the West, your character is assassinated. They make you into a monster. And why do they do that? A, because their ideas can't stand up to challenge. I'll debate anyone in the war of ideas, anyone, anywhere. I know I will win. So they have to, it's ad hominem attacks. They have to make you into a monster, because if you are a monster, who listens to a monster? Who listens to the message? What rational person is going to say, oh, I want to hear what this Ku Klux Klan, Graham Puba has to say? The idea that they call me a neo-Nazi, a Jewish girl whose grandparents fled anti-Semitism in Europe and Russia, shows you how absurd and scary the left is. The fact that they say Nazism is hard leftism. Excuse me? The Nazi Party is the National Socialist Workers' Party. Read Mein Kampf. Yeah, Hitler was a Jew hater, but he was also a hard leftist. He was a socialist. But it's accepted de facto that Nazism is on the right. These are the big, giant lies that the left advances without challenge. And that's why people like you and me are not just, defamed and libeled, but now, after Trump was elected, they say, how did that happen? We have everything. We have the movies, we have media, we have music, we have academia, we have everything. How did that happen? Websites like mine and yours, shows like yours, social media. So you see, it's gotten worse for us after Trump was elected because social media giants are run by uniformly leftist corporate managers. And so I, for example, have a number of groups on Facebook. My one page is 1.2 million. They block my newsfeed. They block it so that my people don't get on their timelines, their newsfeeds anymore, my posts from my website. Google AdSense suspended my account. How am I supposed to make a living? They starve you. Google AdSense said my site was dangerous and derogatory. I'm posting news stories. I don't understand. YouTube deleted my channel. PayPal deleted my account. Pinterest, those housewives, okay, can't share my links because it's inappropriate content. So there are a number of battles. This is why I'm suing the DOJ, because the DOJ grants immunity to these social media giants under Section 230 of the FEC code that must be lifted. If the government could go after American tobacco and could go after Standard Oil and President Clinton could sue Microsoft and they could break up Ma Bell, then these antitrust laws must be used to break up Facebook or to impose the First Amendment on them. Because the fact is, in the last century, your method of communication was the telephone. Today, your method of communication is your IP address. That's your method of communication. And they're spying on me, and my comment is on Facebook and saying, oh, you can't say that to your friend. Oh, no, we're going to put you in Facebook jail. We're going to block you. We're going to ban you. You're going to be shadow banned on Twitter. Milo is going to be suspended, deleted from Twitter. There's nowhere else. There's no other place like Twitter. So these are the battles of the future. The fact that we got our message out there on social media, and yes, and this David defeated Goliath. They are still smarting. They cannot get over it. And this is why the battles are becoming all the more crucial right now. You cannot rest. There are no rest for the fighters. None.
You know, I think you left out one important detail there. Yes, the Nazi thing trivializes you and it makes your voice irrelevant, but it also dehumanizes you. And when they can dehumanize us and say this person is a monster, not only do you not want to listen to a monster, but you can kill a monster and it's a just kill. And so a fatwa on a monster doesn't seem as terrible because she gets people killed. She had 2 people killed in Texas. So she's a monster. She's a killer. She got killed. It's a spoil of war. It's a casualty.
Bingo. And you know what is never mentioned in the media? These jihadists were targeting the Super Bowl. They were planning for 18 months. They were going out into the desert. They were target shooting. They were planning for 18 months some spectacular act of jihad. And then when I announced the exhibit, they decided to do that instead. Nobody talks about that the lives were saved by that exhibit. Nobody talks about what would have happened. No one. And so, again, this is dishonest. This is the American people being disarmed in the information battle space. And so we have our work cut out for us. But there are no casual observers in this war. There is the right side, there is a wrong side, and the middle is evil. Any compromise, as Ayn Rand said, between death and poison, between food and poison, death wins. Any compromise between good and evil wins. People have to get involved. There's no middle of the road. Middle, sitting on the fence. You are aiding and abetting the enemy. Everybody has to get activated. Everybody has to get active in this fight. And look, if history has taught us anything, it's that the individual can change the course of human events. Boom.
Pamela, I don't know what you had for breakfast or your combination of coffees, but you need to write that down and then remember that you are the most perfect on you've ever been when you have this combination of, I don't know if you had an egg McMuffin and 2 espressos or whatever it is. That's your formula. That is your secret formula. Put that in a lockbox as your secret recipe. Because my mind is ash. I had no idea about half of these things. Wow.
Yeah. Listen, thank you so much for having me. You know, this is a subject matter that people just don't want to touch. They have no problem with guns. They have no problem. But jihad is the third rail. People are terrified of it. They're afraid. They don't want to be called a racist, Islamophobic, anti-Muslim bigot. And so I'm deeply grateful that you had me on to discuss Fatwa Hunted in America.
Well, let's get that book out there. I can't wait to read it. It sounds like it's going to be a thrilling ride.
It's shocking. It's really a tell-all. I don't think people have any clue. I urge people to order it. Go to Amazon or go to Barnes & Noble, fatwabook.com or fatwabook.org, fatwabook.org and gellabook.com. The reason why I want them to do it now is because, Barnes & Noble won't carry this book.
Yeah.
But if I have a large enough pre-order, they will. And what I mean to, look, the book is going to do well. What I want to do here is widen our sphere of influence. I want to push the boundaries outside of my online audience. I've got to reach other Americans, in the information battle space. And if I'm in a Barnes and Noble or I'm in these bookstores or even in the airport, I will. Thanks to Milo, Dangerous Books, they published this. I couldn't get. Listen, I didn't shop it, but for 6 years after Garland, nobody would publish my book. I had successful books. Everyone was afraid. Their publishing house would be blown up. They should be more afraid of not publishing.
Yeah.
They should be more afraid of doing nothing. So kudos to Milo's Dangerous Books for and printing the cartoon. No Western media will do that.
No one's done that. Yeah, that's the first time I've seen it in print.
Yeah. Milo. And so, this is all really new and wonderful, and I'm very excited. And please pre-order the book so that we can get into bookstores. We really must change the direction of the national dialogue, and we need to do it. We're reaching a tipping point, and now is the time. Now is the time. You're going to wake up in a gulag. You're going to be like, how did I get here?
I just pre-ordered it as you were saying that. So
you're the best.
It's on the way. Proceeded to checkout. Pamela, best of luck with this book. You're a constant inspiration.
God bless you. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.